church that is filled with holy people that do not sin, that do not walk away from God, who are never sidetracked, who are always aware of God's will for their lives. Am I true in my understanding of this? You folks are a perfect and holy people. Am I accurate? I don't hear a resounding affirmation of this comment. So I have a feeling that our scriptures are very appropriate for us today. We have been working on the concept of vision, knowing what God is calling us to. We talked about how God was calling the people of Israel from slavery to free people, and then a people who would serve him as a nation. Then we have the creation of a nation, but the forgetting to raise up leaders in that nation. Now we're looking at having a vision, starting out our life, starting out our ministries, starting out our time and walk with God, and then the world intercedes and interrupts, and we kind of get sidetracked. None of us have ever followed a rabbit trail, have we? Anyone here ever followed a rabbit trail? Does anyone even know what I'm talking about? We've got a couple folks nodding their heads. They don't go in straight lines, do they? They kind of meander and kind of go under shrubs and anything else that they can find, and you get lost rather easily, and they backtrack, and it's a mess. Life is messy. God is not. God takes chaos and creates order. Genesis tells us that. We try and take order and order it to our own liking and create chaos. Have you ever noticed that? As I was looking at our scriptures, I realized that we are a people who are easily swayed by the things that are happening around us. We're easily conned into what the world tells us is the right thing to do. If you don't believe me, how many of you watch television commercials? Whether you want to or not, even when you turn the sound off, didn't you ever notice you turn the sound off of commercials and you still end up watching? They suck you right in, don't they? And they give you all kinds of images of what life should look like. After all, I can remember looking at billboards, and they haven't changed much, by the way. For people who are smoking, you are going to be glamorous, you're going to be handsome and everything else if you just smoke Marlboro Lights. Now, I'm not here to speak for or against smoking, I'm just saying. Those are images. Or if you wear this perfume, or you wash with this soap, as men, the women are going to fall all over you. There's one recently where the angels descend and they even tear their halos off to be with this guy. I mean, come on. Acts, yes. Commercials. Society tells us what's good and what's great. You want to buy this car if you want to be seen as successful. You want to have this kind of clothing if you want to be seen as popular or the best. And sometimes those drown out the things we know are true. The things that we know are from God. How many of you have ever bought into an idea only to find out that it was really wrong? I think all of us are nodding our heads to a slight degree. We've all fallen into the concept. So I'm going to take this back just a little bit and see how many of you have heard things along these lines. If your friends were to jump off of a cliff, would you do it? I see a lot of smiles. Either you've said it or you've heard it. What was usually happening when your mom, dad, or grandparents, or whomever told you those words? You were heading down the path of trouble. Or let's look at it another way. Would you shape up and put your head on straight? Got some folks nodding their heads at that. We've got all kinds of these. Now I want to take a look at what Scripture has to tell us. Where your treasure is, there lies your heart. So where's your treasure? Are you storing it up in heaven, being kept safe by God, or are we storing it up in stuff that the world tells us is necessary. 1 Kings, I love this. Chapter 2. David's time had come near to go the way of his fathers. Using a different phrasing of language, it was his time to die. Talks to his son and says this, I am about to die. Be strong and show yourself a man. Now, men in the congregation, have you ever had someone say, stand up and be a man? Or something similar to those words? I see some heads going. Did it always necessarily mean a good thing? I can remember having somebody tell me that, and what they expected me to do started out great. Stand up for yourself. Don't be a pushover. But implied in that was also, and push anyone who's in the way out of your way. That, I don't think, is in keeping with what God has planned for us. I want you to stand up and be a man. Be strong. Show yourself a man. And this is how you do it. Keep the charge of the Lord your God. In other words, be aware of who God is and where God is at. Walk in his ways. Keep his statutes, his commands, his ordinances, his suggestions, his testimonies, as it has been written in the law. That way you can prosper. And that the Lord will be able to keep his promise. We have talked several times before that God is a holy God. God cannot stand in untruth. God cannot stand in unholiness. Because God is holy. It drives out anything that isn't. Okay? How many of us can in all good conscience say that we are a good and pure and holy people with absolutely nothing that would bar us from being able to stand in the presence of God blameless? Anyone? Didn't think so. Time for some confession, then. What holds us back? What is it that the world has put before us that holds us to a point where we don't see what God is calling us to be? We know what it is. So here's my question. What is it that the Lord commands of us as a church? What is it that should dictate our life? Let me put it this way. What is it that God has said that our every word, our every action, our every thought should be directed by? Love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your mind, with all of your soul, with all of your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Every action, every word, every thought should be put up against that. So here's my question. How many of you right now have something running through your head that is not directed by that command? I have a roast in the oven. I hope it doesn't burn. Pastor better be quiet. Quickly. It's time to go. We've got 15 minutes. How many of us in this last week have said something that would not fit over against love the Lord your God and your neighbor? Anyone? It's time for confession, folks. How many of us have done anything in this last week that over against this one command, love the Lord your God, love your neighbor, wouldn't fit? We do have something that directs our every action, or at least it should. So why don't we? Solomon made a marriage alliance with Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. He took Pharaoh's daughter to be his wife and brought her into the city of David. Now, we just got done hearing David say to his son, be a man, live according to the law, the suggestions, the ordinances, and the expectations of God. What was one of the expectations? You will not marry foreign women. Women are also not supposed to be marrying foreign men, by the way. So what does he do? What's the first thing he does? He marries a foreign woman. Not only that, but he puts himself first. He builds his own home before he builds the temple. And there's a number of other things, if we read closely, that he doesn't do. He goes and wonderfully makes sacrifices to God, but he doesn't go to the most holy of most holy places. He goes to the high places, but he does not go to the Ark of the Covenant, which is known as to being the seat of God. Now, you remember me having the kids up here just a few minutes ago, and I said, how many of you have ever tried to hide something that you knew wasn't right? And most of them nodded their heads. Now I'm going to bring it over here to you folks. How many of you have ever done anything that was wrong that you tried to hide? Sure. Solomon knew he wasn't exactly in the right, but he also was not willing to give up on his faith. Does that sound like a lot of us? We know we're not living the way we're supposed to, but we still have faith in God and we don't want to lose that? Doesn't that sound like a lot of us? Sure it does. So he goes and he offers sacrifices and everything else, and God sees that, God recognizes it, and God even blesses him for continuing to offer sacrifice. But the reality is he still calls him back to the point in question. Are you living according to the way you're supposed to?